For me, it's about an internal striving. I mean, my reason for being here is to encourage people not just to move outwards and try and change others and manipulate situation, but to risk going inwards, going into their own personal struggle, their personal mythology, to use creativity in all its senses, to arm themselves in the best possible way. I mean, we are in a situation where we're watching, as each year goes past, a smaller and smaller percentage of the world's population owning a larger and larger percentage of the wealth. And the only thing that we can do to fight against that is to develop ourselves internally, to make ourselves more flexible, more creative, more powerful. So yes, I agree.
Yes and no. I think that the climate crisis could best, and a lot of the other environmental problems that we see, and social justice problems that we see, can be analyzed as symptoms of a spiritual crisis, of a consumer society that prizes greed above all else, that fails to understand what it is that the personal journey, the spirit's journey is about, that fails to celebrate care and compassion for the world, for each other, that still models its behavior in terms of the economy, but also in terms of social relationships on a patriarchal and exploitative model of grabbing resources and running, as opposed to nurturing. There's a lot to do in analyzing that, and there's a lot of personal growth and analysis, and as you say, loving oneself, and as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. It does relate to what's going on in your heart. On the other hand, if everyone went off on that meditative journey to figure that out, by the time we got to the place where we could fix things, it would be too late. So I suggest that we make the political struggle an aspect of our spiritual struggle. For me, what goes on in my heart is I go into Parliament, I go back Monday morning when we resume, and I went in there the first day when I was elected, determined, and I try, not just in Parliament, but in general, always, to try to love everybody I encounter, to find something lovable about everybody I encounter. Now, you know the people I'm dealing with in Parliament, so you can begin to imagine that this, but it actually is quite possible. I now can say, without a doubt, that I love everybody I encounter. They don't always love me back. I actually had this conversation with Peter Kent, who's the former Minister of Environment, Conservative. Just the other day, we were walking out of the church after Jim Flaherty's funeral, and Peter introduced me to his wife, and I said, I said to her, I love Peter. She said, I know. She said, he says you're the most affectionate person in Parliament. I said, yes, I probably am. And then Peter came up, and I said, Peter, I was just telling your wife that I love everybody I work with. I just keep loving them, even if they don't love me back. And he looked at me and he said, most of us do. Now, that is, for me, validation that I've made my working space a better place for me, so that's a little selfish. On the other hand, it also means that I'm trying as hard as I can to create a loving and compassionate space for the other MPs too, because we can't hear each other over the noise if it's only yelling. If we can, in fact, embrace our common humanity and find ways to work together, that's better than the alternative of how politics is currently so toxic. I am very much, though, what's going on in my own heart and in my own mind, and virtually all the time, is an extraordinarily compelling sense of urgency, given the science around climate, which informs me in my actions to do what I'm now doing, which is obviously political, but to try to encourage all other members of the human family, wherever they are, to also become more political, because this is not a problem that can be solved at the level of individual action. Individual action can lead us to the kind of transformational change that's required in our society. Ideally, that transformational change in our energy policies and economics and technologies is accompanied by a spiritual transition as well, that makes it impossible to imagine a society where growing inequality between the 1% and the 99 continues to grow, or in which those who enrich themselves by gambling with other people's money, losing their money and further enriching themselves in the bonuses as they, leave behind the wretched losses of those who had so much less to lose and lost more than those who were gambling. I mean, the casino capitalism of our current economy is completely immoral. And it also fuels the fossil fuel industry and its ability to operate without constraint, at least in Canada. So I don't know if I'm responding as you would hope me to, but I don't think we can afford to detach ourselves from society till we find spiritual perfection.
I had the privilege of being able to, for the last 20-odd years, do a lot of traveling across the country, meet a lot of Canadians, have a chance to talk to them in their communities, in their neighborhoods. And it was quite obvious to me that these are intelligent people that have a deep concern for the environment. They want things to happen. They want things to change. They want our Earth to be healthy. They're looking for the policymakers to take some chances, enact some progressive legislation, and get things going where we are actually starting to heal the issues that we have on our shoulders. What I was puzzled with is, despite the fact that they understand the crisis that we're in and desperately want things to change, they don't have a focus or a direction or an idea of really what they as an individual can do to help deal with these issues, which seem so enormous and so overwhelming that it doesn't appear to be something that one person from Victoria, BC can take care of. So the concern that I have is that we are facing competition with large corporations and governments and the fossil fuel industry that have enormous resources and opportunities to be able to mislead and confuse. And those on the other side of the issue are trying their best with reason and fact and evidence, but that doesn't seem to be working. And this is really the thing that I am most concerned with, is how do we break this disconnect? How do we get average people who desperately want things to change to be able to carry that baton and actually make it happen?
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to think in terms of it in an either-or situation. I think every one of us has to have the potential to have the rejuvenating of our energy daily, so that we can actually keep bringing to bear our enthusiasm and our willingness to fight the good fight, for whatever it is you care to call it. But if you simply focus on your outward picture without feeding yourself, it's going to be very much like those situations that they talk about in the plane, where unless you put the oxygen on yourself, you're not actually going to be able to do anything for anybody else. So my encouragement is for everyone to do everything they can to look after themselves. Look after themselves in their core, to do anything they can to make themselves as healthy as they possibly can. Not just physically in terms of what you eat and that kind of thing, but also that you grow your mind, you grow your heart. And for me, the big issue is the one of creating a genuine balance between your left side and your right side, your left brain and your right brain, your male and your female. Finding a way of being able to use your intuition and your intellect equally and bringing to bear the one that is most appropriate to the situation.
Is it really... there are a lot of people who say that sounds fantastic. On paper, that looks good. not as easy to affect that kind of change, not only in your own life, but in your neighbor's life, in your family's life. What do you say to the people who maybe feel a little defeated, who say, I try, I want to, but am I going to be able to really help this ripple effect, move this wave forward? And is the world really going to change when I just make these individual changes myself?
Not instantly. Absolutely not. It's a Chinese water torture, essentially. The drips will fall, but we encourage the drips to fall by our own exercises, our own personal struggle. Who said it's going to be easy? It's not. It's going to be incredibly difficult. So if we don't do it on an individual basis, how can we possibly expect our society to do it?
But there is that sense of urgency. How do we put the two together and make this a positive thing that is a ripple effect around the world?
I think as you wake up internally, you realize how urgent it is. You start to see that we really are on the 59th second of the 59th minute. I mean, as human beings, we are notorious for leaving it to that point. Well, that's where we are now. So, we all have to get our finger there. That's all there is to it.
I tend to think about it in terms of, and by the way, you didn't give us your name, who works in the machine shop and has the garden back, but that may be one of the most lovely stories I've heard in a very long time, and I really sort of wanted to rush forward and embrace you, but I'm going to stay here for now, but maybe you can meet me later. I just thought that was a wonderful story, and such a good way of expressing how we reach out and without, preaching at other people, get people that we think might not be aware of all the ramifications of the issues and engage people in a positive way. That's a really lovely example. I tend to have I'm aware of how many people beat themselves up for the fact that we live in a society where in order to function at all, I get so sick of the Twitter trolls. I try to be loving towards them, but since I don't think a lot of them are real people, I occasionally get exasperated because they say things like when I show up to go to a place, as soon as I tweet that I'm speaking someplace, they say, did you fly there? I think, yes, I flew there, yes. And then they come along with a hashtag hypocrite, and it goes, I think, but you can't live in this society without using fossil fuels because the society is currently hardwired to fossil fuel addiction. And there is a pathway out, and it's a bright and promising pathway. But for the individuals who beat themselves up over it, I keep pointing to say, look, we can only do as much as you can do as an individual in the constraints that we're currently in. And those constraints can't be lifted by individuals. They're lifted by a society that is put in place. Eventually we will do those things that are required, because as you say, we're at the 59th minute, 59th second, we've got to change. The change, yes, is personal, but it's also going to be something that occurs through the collective action of democracies that are functioning. And it's going to be the moment. So when people are always shrinking their ecological footprint, shrinking their carbon footprint, that's great. But that reductionist approach to I'm doing less and less and less and less with carbon has to be accompanied by I'm doing more and more and more and more with my voice in a democracy to demand more. So it's a bit of both. It's grow your political footprint while you shrink your ecological footprint. And this conversation is fascinating for how much it's also brought in the questions of your spiritual awareness, what you're doing in your heart, how you expand and reach out to others and live left brain and right brain. I haven't had a conversation like this in a long time. But those things are all, I hope, part of the journey and can all be done at once. So I guess my one point is we don't have time to do them sequentially. We have to do all these things at once.